This conference will now be recorded.
All right. Any questions, guys, before we get started? So yesterday we were discussing mostly about load balancers, how to create the load balancer, how to manage traffic using the load balancer, and etc. Any questions still here?
Sir,
Good. Please.
how do we know that how many virtual machines to be placed in a backend pool?
How do we know how many virtual machines to be placed in a backend pool? Completely depends upon your application. It is not we who decide it. It is the architecture team who decides it out. It depends upon the incoming traffic. It depends upon the number of requests your application is processing, the incoming load, and all these things out here as such. So it completely depends upon, let's say, how your application is designed and what your application is designed for.
Okay, suppose if we get 10 requests at the front end load balancer, so as the
Mhm.
definition says, if we have the five virtual machines, so the load balancer will send two requests to each virtual machine or any.
It's a round robin. So if there are 10 requests, as you said, and there are five virtual machines running in the background, each and every machines will process two requests each. If all the machines are, let's say, really healthy out there as such.
Okay, so if we have more than 10 virtual machines, suppose we have placed 15 virtual machines, we have 10
Okay.
requests, so remaining 5 virtual machines have to be sit idle. So
Correct.
for that virtual machines also we have to pay some reserved cost. So how
Definitely.
we
We have to pay
choose
the cost.
that? So so we have to know the virtual machines to be placed in the backend pool, right?
Mhm.
So
So can you come again with your question? The last part, I'm sorry, I didn't get that.
So if we have more than virtual machines required, what we required to be sit in the backend pool,
Hmm.
so the incoming so the so incoming requests are low, but
Right.
we have to pay the remaining virtual machines
Yes, we do have to. Yes, that's correct.
who are sitting idle.
That's correct. We have to pay that because Microsoft doesn't really, sorry, Microsoft doesn't really take into consideration whether the sorry, whether the machine is idle or whether the machine is actually running. It just tells you whether you created a machine or not. Like, did I create a machine or not? Is something that it just tells you out there. So yes, even if the machine is idle, we still have to pay for it.
Okay. And one more question: what is the
Mhm.
difference between the front end IP and the public IP that we have created in that front end IP?
Nothing. Front end IP same. Like, it's just a public IP that we have created and assigned to a load balancer. So
So
we are
if we
just
take
calling.
the
Mhm. Good.
if we take the public IP, we can select one of the IPs of the virtual machines, right? So
Correct.
if we take the public IP of one of the virtual machines, so it will the load balancer allocate the IP address of the virtual machine to all the virtual machines.
Correct. Yes.
Oh, okay, okay. So, and one more question. In command prompt, you do some ping test, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so, in the backend load balancer, that means health probe check whether the virtual machine is healthy or not by placing the IP address. So,
Mm-hmm.
in that case, all the virtual machines have the same public IP. So, how will it check whether
So
that
that's the
particular
reason.
virtual machine?
Yes, that's the reason it won't talk to the public IP at all. It's going to talk to the private IP address. Each and every virtual machine will have its own private IP address out there, and the load balancer will do a ping test on the private IP and not the public IP address out there as such.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, any more questions, guys?
Sir, good morning, sir. Madhu here.
Good one. Go ahead, please.
Sir, yesterday we have seen the public load balancer, how it will distribute the load across the
Hmm.
backend resources and everything. Means
Correct.
what are the ports we are using to manage the traffic and everything.
Hmm.
So how internal, for example, if you take how internal load balancer will work, and what kind of ports you are using, and how it will distribute the resources across, sorry,
So if
traffic
you look at
and
an
everything.
internal load balancing, right? So for example, let's say I talk about load balancers Azure. So now this is a public load balancer. So let's say that
Mm-hmm.
this is your application diagram. Normally this is how we give the diagrams out here. This is the internet, and this is an internet facing load balancer or a public facing load balancer, which means that from your laptop, you as a user, if you send a request onto the internet, your request is going to go into this particular load balancer, and one of the application servers or one of the let's say web servers out here, they go ahead and respond back to your request. But internal load balancing comes into picture, telling that, okay, fine, what if you have a database? Let's say if I just scroll down, and here you have something called as a business tier. Let's say a database tier out here. So you can simply go ahead and run a SQL database, or let's say a Postgres SQL database or a MySQL or something on one of these machines. So what happens really, sorry, what happens really is that your front end or the web tier out here talks to the backend. So you have the front end to which a user is talking to, and from here the request is going into a backend tier wherein you have databases, which we'll talk about on how databases are established and all these things out here. And in case I want to make sure that there are multiple instances of the databases, we can go ahead,
Mm-hmm.
create 3 different databases out here, and we can put an internal load balancer. And when when putting an internal load balancer, I can tell that only requests from these machines are accepted over a port called 443 HTTPS. This
So
is how
no
we can
matter,
segregate. I'm sorry.
so no matter if the VMs having some other port also, it will sorry accept that, right?
Yes, it'll accept that.
Okay. For example, if the existing, sorry, VMs having a port number 80, then will
Mhm.
internal load balance will accept that traffic, right?
Correct.
And diverts to the fourth.
That's correct. So that's the reason,
Mm,
you just need to look at the documentation out here telling what exactly they're telling. The public load balancer and the internal load balancer. Click on that. It's just telling you what is the difference between a public and an internal load balancer, and where is an internal load balancer really used out here. Why is an internal load balancer really used? And they've given a very good
okay.
diagram out here telling the use case scenario of something. Telling you have a web tier, which is nothing but your application tier out here, which is nothing but your front end, and a backend. Your backend, you have databases, and your databases is using an internal load balancing solution out here as such.
Oh, okay, sir. Thank you. Actually, I have gone through
Yes.
the documentation, but I get confused. That's why I asked this.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Sure. As and when you go through, or as and when someone goes through the documentation, right? Also look at the tutorials on what is, or let's say, how do I go ahead and let's say start with, or let's say something like how to go ahead and let's say it has a great amount of tutorials telling how do you create something, how do you let's say go ahead and create using the portal or create using PowerShell or ARM template. You have all these things out here as such. So if you just have a look at it, this will give you a holistic understanding of what really a load balancing solution really is, and so on and so forth. Yes, any more questions, guys? Anyone, any more questions that I can take? Okay, good questions.
Sir,
Good question.
so one more doubt, sir. Sir, under free trial subscription at max, sorry, is there any limitation for IP addresses, sir? Means,
Yes, there is also a limitation of the IP addresses. So if you want to understand what is the limit, right, just
mhm,
go to your subscription. Just click on your subscription out here and just scroll down. There is something called usage plus quota. If you
okay,
go here, depending upon the resource that you select. For example, public IP addresses. Let's see in my case, it's telling virtual machines. Let me take the public IP addresses out here. Let's see, this is compute, public IP, so fine. It comes under, I think, public IP address out here as such. Okay. Region is this one. Let's see, compute. So, okay, networking. Yes, it comes under networking if I'm not wrong. And if you look at this, right, there is something called static public IP address out here that I have. And in my case, in this particular region called East US 2, at max, I can go ahead and create 10 public IPs. At max. This is the maximum public IPs that I can create. And I've already created one out of the 10. Because reason being, I have a virtual machine that has a public IP address out here as such. So I have a virtual machine which has a public IP address. So if you go into that usage plus quota, right, that will tell you what is the number of IPs that you can actually create in a particular region in that particular given subscription out here, depending upon which you can go ahead and see what to delete and what not to delete and all these things out here.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. So let's see. I'll just take a question that is in the chat. While creating the VM, we select RDP, HTTP, and HTTPS. Post that, why do we create an inbound rule to allow RDP? No, we do not. If we do not allow HTTP, HTTPS, and RDP, that's when we go ahead and create. Sorry, that's when we go ahead and let's say allow the inbound rule out here as such. Otherwise,
Oh,
we don't go ahead and do that. So while starting the demos, right, I did not allow these ports. I did not, let's say, really allow these ports, and that's the reason I went ahead and I explicitly into the NSG, I added a rule called RDP out here as such.
Suresh, yesterday I tried creating the virtual machine and I got that error, that pop-up. So after creating another rule to the inbound thing, then
Hmm.
the virtual machine got executed and it was launched.
Maybe the
Already the
RDP wasn't
RDP
there.
is allowed. Sorry.
Okay. Can you just send me a screenshot of what is the error that you were getting so that I can have a look at it? Because if the RDP is already allowed, right, it
Yeah.
shouldn't tell us that there is an error there as such.
Actually, the RDP is allowed. I have checked it, and after that,
Mhm,
the pop-up error while signing, we'll get a pop-up error about the access
mhm,
and everything,
mhm.
right? So
Okay.
that was popped up, and after going and creating the rule, the error was negligible, and the login has been successfully done, and the web server is
Sure.
also launched.
Sure. Please send me
So
the
that's why
screenshot
I asked
because
this
I
question.
don't. Yeah, please send me the screenshot so that I can have a look at that.
Sure, sure.
Yes, I'll just take a question, one quick question offline, and then we'll get started. Yes, good. We need more IPs. When you say we need more IPs, are you talking in the case of a free trail account? You can either request for a quota increase. There's something called quota increase request, or you'll have to delete your previous IPs. So if you delete cleanup, then you can let's say reuse those things. Okay, so I'll just park a couple of questions and we'll start now with the session out there. Right. So let's do one thing. Let's create a virtual machine today. Okay. Anil, can you please go on mute, please? Thank you. So we'll create a virtual machine today, and while we're creating a virtual machine, we create a virtual network and all these components out here. So we create a virtual network. We create a subnet inside this particular virtual network, and as a part of the virtual machine creation, we also go ahead and create the NSG rules. So I'll just put the NSG out here, and I'll go ahead and as a part of the creation, we also go ahead and create a NIC card. This NIC card will get attached to the subnet. Take a private IP out here. Sorry, take a private IP and get attached to the virtual machine. Get, let's say, attach itself to the virtual machine out here, and NSG is getting attached to the subnet. Is there anything I'm missing on this particular diagram? Maybe a disk. Anything else that I'm missing to, let's say, address?
Disk,
Anything else? Any other
right?
component? I'm sorry. Go ahead, please. Any other component I'm missing here? Have the virtual
Public
network
IP.
subnet public IP? Great, public IP.
Public.
Now the yes, public IP, true. But the point here is that I don't want to create a virtual machine with a public IP. Let's do that. I'll say create and let me go ahead start with virtual machines directly. I'll say create a virtual machine. I'll say this is something like North Europe, and I'll say this is PM North Europe. I'll say this is North Europe. I'm okay with having a 2019 data center and I'm okay with the size. I'll say test user. I'll go and give something like Microsoft-001 as my password. Just scroll down and I am not allowing any ports. Today I won't allow any ports out here as such. None. No ports. So please keep in mind there are no ports allowed. Next I'll go to the disks. Next I'll say networking. In the networking, I'll say public IP is what? None. Also, let me create a new network. Let me say that this is a demo network North Europe. I'll say the address range of this network is 192.168.0.0 /16. I'll say the subnet name is something like demo subnet. And what can be the address range here, guys? What should be the subnet address range here? What can be the subnet address range here?
Uh,
192.168.0.0.
192.168.0.0
68 dot
00
forward slash
24.
what?
slash 24.
24. Anything greater than or equal to 16?
Less
24.
than
Yes.
Mm.
Yes. Greater than
Less
equal to
than
16 and then
29.
less than 29. Right. So this is the range. I'll say okay. So this is what I want to create and I don't want a public IP address. I am isolating this particular virtual network from the entire world. Again, I'm not selecting any inbound ports, management monitoring. I'll just disable this out. I'll say review and create this out here as such. So once this is reviewing in this one, I'll just go ahead hit the create button. So this is what I'm doing right now. I have a virtual machine that I've created in a network called North Europe. So let me put the isolation out here. I have a virtual network. And inside this, yes, I of course have a subnet. And this virtual network address space is something like 192.168.0.0 /16. This is the address that I do have, inside which I just created one subnet. And what is the address space of the subnet? 192.168.0.0
0 by
/24.
24.
And how many addresses do you think this will give me? /24? 251 exactly, meaning 256 minus 5, 251 addresses, usable addresses, inside which I am creating a virtual machine. So this virtual machine will have a private IP address and not a public IP. I'm not giving a public IP at all. I'm giving a private IP address. Can anyone tell me what could be the private IP address here? What could be the private IP here that I can or go ahead and create out here?
192.168 dot
192.168 dot something,
zero
1
0 dot
0 dot
something,
1
6.
0
0
dot
dot 1
1,
dot 1 dot
2,
0.
3, whatever it is, right? So I'll say 0.4 because the first 5 IPs are not usable in all these things. So I'll start with 0.4 out here. And now it's telling, okay, fine, this is the machine. This is the private IP of the machine. So if I go to the resource, I have a machine. If I just scroll down, I do not have a public IP address at all. I have a private IP address range right now. Now, my point here is that as a user from my laptop, I want to do an RDP into this particular machine. I want to do what? RDP into this particular machine out here. Now tell me, can I take the private IP address and can I go to remote desktop? Can I go ahead and do the RDP? Okay. Can I put this? Can I do the RDP out here?
No.
No. So let's try that out. So it's trying to establish a connection. It is telling that, okay, fine, I'm trying to run a connection establishment and it's going to fail. Right? It's eventually going to fail out here. Failed. Now, my question is that what is restricting me to go ahead and let's say interact directly with the private IP? What do you think is
Network.
restricting? Yes, please go
Virtual
ahead.
Network.
network.
I'm
Network.
sorry. Network.
Virtual network.
Anything?
NSG.
NSG. Exactly.
NIC.
NSG. NSG. That's great. Yes, NSG. I have someone called as an NSG out here, which is telling me that you know what? If I go into the NSG, let's say networking, and if I go into the NSG out here, let's see this network interface. Okay, where is the NSG that I do have? Okay, fine. This is the NSG out here that I have. So in the NSG, I haven't given any inbound or the outbound rules at all, right? But what I have here is that I have a set of predefined rules. I have a set of what? Predefined rules that is controlling the traffic in and out of my network. Again, can I delete these rules? Can I delete it?
Think not possible.
Yes.
Yes. How can we delete it? Let's see. We'll need to click on this. Is this clickable? These are
Yes.
default rules. You cannot delete them. Default rules are system rules. You cannot really delete them out here. And what do the rules say? Just let's say, let's see. Let's go ahead and inspect the rules out here. Now the rule is telling something like this. At a priority called 65,500, what is it telling you? Deny all inbound. What do you mean by this, guys? What do you mean by deny all inbound? Simple English.
It won't allow the outside world to enter into the network.
Exactly. You won't allow anyone or from the internet or wherever it is to enter into the network. And the action here is what? Deny. Which means that Microsoft will say, okay, fine. Let me now put a table telling that 65,500 deny everything. Deny everything. So you from the outside world cannot talk to this particular virtual machine at all. So forget about that. Let's see. Let's see. At another priority, which is what? 65,001. Is 65,001 less than 65,500? Yes. Yes. No. Maybe.
Ye-
What do we
Yes.
have?
Yes,
Allow
less than.
Azure load
Yes.
balancer inbound, and the priority here or the action here is what? Allow. What do you think this will do? Why do you think this rule is there?
Load balancer.
Allow Azure load balancer inbound. What is exactly this one?
Mm,
Going by the name of it, what do you understand by it?
This will sense the traffic in between the resources only, I think.
Okay, in between resources, not really.
Mm,
When you have an Azure load balancer, this load balancer can talk to this particular machine over the private IP. That's the reason I was telling you don't need to have a public IP when you need a load balancer out here. When you have a load balancer, you don't have a public IP at all. The load balancer can talk to the machine over a private IP. Reason being, you have this rule here at a lesser priority than 65,500. So what Microsoft will do in that in its table, Microsoft will tell, okay, fine, you know what, 65,000, let's say 500. Okay, I put an additional zero here. 65,001. It's telling a lesser priority. So what I'll do is that deny everything minus Azure load balancer. As and when the rule priority number or the number of the rule gets less, the priority of the rule is more. So lesser, let's say lesser the number, greater is the priority. So it's telling allow the Azure load balancer. So for it's telling, okay, fine, I'll delay everyone, but I am going to allow Azure load balancer out here. Next, you have one more rule. What is that? 65,500, even more lesser priority. What it is telling you? Allow VNet inbound. So it's telling you at even more lesser priority, it's telling deny everything, but allow Azure load balancer. Also allow VNet inbound. What does it mean is that if within the same VNet, I'll just remove the load balancer for a minute. Within the same VNet, if there is another subnet, and if there is a virtual machine in this particular subnet, this virtual machine can talk to this particular virtual machine without you having to do anything over a private IP address. Meaning the communication within the network, the communication within one virtual network is allowed. Meaning one virtual network is giving you like a room. Inside that room, you can speak to anyone, but you cannot speak to, let's say, people outside the world. That's what it's telling you. But from outside, you can talk to someone known as a load balancer. You can talk to someone who's called as a load balancer out here as such. These are all the default rules are actually telling me. Telling that, you know what, deny everything, but allow Azure load balancer inbound, allow VNet inbound, and etc. What I'll do is that I'll add one more rule here. This is a user defined rule. I'll say add, and what I'll do is I'll say add a rule called RDP, remote desktop protocol. So I'll say source is any, destination is any, service is RDP, and I'll say allow this. And what is the priority here? 100. What is the priority number here? 100 out here. Very, very, very less. I'll say add. So I'm now adding one more rule called RDP to allow the remote desktop protocol out here. I'll say refresh. Now it's telling allow any RDP inbound. So anyone who's trying to do an RDP, please allow them. So now the rule becomes something like this. It's telling 100 allow RDP. So this is what Microsoft is now going to do. Microsoft is going to say that, okay, fine, you know what? Okay, Microsoft is now going to say that, you know what? I'll firstly deny everyone. I won't permit anyone, but I will allow my Azure load balancer. I'll allow virtual network communication. I'll allow also what? RDP connections out here as such. So my question now is that can I now go into my virtual machine, take the private IP of the machine, I'll copy this. Now I have allowed the RDP, right? Can I now go ahead and connect to it?
No,
Let's try that. But RDP is allowed. RDP is
mm,
allowed out here.
but
And let's see
still
what
that.
it really does.
But without HTTP, how we can, sir?
I'm sorry, can you come again, please?
So without allowing HTTP port, so how we can communicate with the load balancer or something?
HTTP is a different concept. HTTP is for your internet traffic, which means that if you want to go ahead and let's say talk to your machine and look at the content that is hosted inside the machine, that's when HTTP actually comes into picture for a web server. RDP and HTTP doesn't have to do or doesn't have any relation with each other out here as such. RDP is a different protocol altogether, which means that from you, let's say from your machine, you want to connect to a machine, you want to connect to let's say this particular virtual machine. RDP should be allowed, but what is happening again?
Internet communication missing, right?
Internet communication is missing. And when you say internet communication is missing, what exactly is missing here?
So we can't access out from outside world.
Correct. So what do we need here?
Public
VPN.
IP.
Yes, what do we need here? If I want to
Public
access
IP.
Sir,
this
is it
public
NIC.
IP, exactly, public IP, which means that the rules that you define, user defined rules. Like for example, I had a rule called RDP. This is only let's say applicable to the public IP addresses. These are applicable to only what? Public IP addresses, but I don't have a public IP address out here. I don't really have a public IP address. This is just an isolated VM that is sitting inside a network out here as such. Now, there is no possibility for me as a user to go ahead and log into this particular machine. There's no possibility at all, right? Let me do one thing. Let me go into virtual machines. Now, you know what? I have one more virtual machine called East-US2 at a different region. If I go in here, this machine has a public IP address. This machine has a public IP address. And also this machine has what? A private IP address out here. Is the private IP different? Is the private IP address different from the one that you see here on my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Which means that this network that is there in a different region called East-US2 is having a private IP address space of 10.0.0.0 forward slash 16. This is the address space it has. And also, I have a network security group rule out here. I have a a subnet and a virtual machine that now has an address of 10.0.0.0 or 10.0.0.4. This is what I see. But it also has a public IP. Can I do the RDP here? Yes, provided if I have the rule. I'll copy this out. Okay. It did not get copied properly. This is not getting copied. Let's see. Okay. So I'm taking the public IP address of my VM that is running in a region called what? ECS2. And I'll say connect. It's asking me for the credentials. And I basically went ahead and I'll say yes. So now I am connecting to this machine called ECS2 over a public IP address called what? 2097.229.121 out here as such. Now my question, please hear me out very carefully. If I am doing an RDP inside this machine, which means I am a user who's a part of this particular machine, I am inside the network called ECS2 out here. My question here is that I am here on this machine and let me say yes and all that stuff. This is a server, so all the server manager kind of loads out. So I'm on this particular machine. I'm inside this machine called ECS2 VM. My question here for everyone is that this: can I make an RDP connection from this machine that's running in the ECS2 to this machine out here? Can I do that? Do you think can I do this?
No.
No, not
No.
possible.
Yes. Let's see. Two different regions, two different networks.
Private load balancer.
Can I do that? Let's do that. I'm into the machine. I'm into, let's say, that particular virtual machine out here. I'll say remote, and I have I have what? Remote desktop connections. I'll go here. I'll take the IP of my North Europe machine. I'm inside East US2 machine. I'll take the IP of the North Europe machine. Which IP should I take again?
192.168.
That's the
Private
only
IP.
option that I have. Private
Private
IP.
IP.
I'll copy this out, paste it here. I'll say connect. So I am inside the VM2 that is running in East US2. I'm trying to connect to the VM1 that is running in North Europe. Same error. Why is this? Why do you think the error is again coming up?
Because the energy of the virtual network one will not allow the outside networks.
Exactly. The energy of this particular, let's say, machine or this particular network will not allow a different network. Again, a different network is nothing but an outside world only for this one. It's a different network. Again, when what I said is that within the network, the communication is allowed. Anything outside the network, it's strictly what? Denied. That is what the rule is telling. Deny everything apart from what? Azure load balancer and everything within the same VNet. But these two are different VNets out here as such. Now, even in real time scenarios, you will face this issue of, let's say, a client comes into picture and says, you know what, I have two different machines, one running in North Europe, the other running in East US. By hook or crook, I want this machine to talk to this machine over a private IP address. I want this machine to talk to this machine over a private IP. In this case, we implement a concept called virtual network to virtual network peering, meaning connecting two different virtual networks so that both the resources or resources inside the virtual network can talk to each other over a private IP address out here securely. Secure connection. Meaning, what I'm talking about is this. If I go inside my virtual networks, am I virtual network out here? I have ECS2 network or North Europe network. Go into any of the networks, not a problem. Scroll down, something called peerings. As of now, there is no peering. I'll say add a peering. Now it's telling for peering to work, two peering links must be created. What it is telling you is that, see, for the peering to actually work, this network should allow the communication to this network and also vice versa. It's like two-way traffic. A two-way traffic needs to be established. So I'll say, okay, fine, great. Let me do that. I'll say peering link name. I'll say link one. I'm creating in which network? East US network out here. I'll just scroll down and I'll take all the default values like allow the traffic, allow all these things out here and etc. Just scroll down. Again, it is telling what? What is the peering link name? It's telling, okay, fine, link one will connect you or link one will establish a communication between this virtual network and this virtual network. One-way traffic. Link 2 is to be in place to allow virtual network 2 to communicate with virtual network 1 also. Both way traffic out here, and that's the reason it's asking what is the name of the next link out here. I'll say this is link 2. Let's scroll down. It's asking which virtual network that you want to connect this virtual network to. So East US 2 you are trying to connect with something. Which virtual network you want to connect? I have North Europe. I'll take this. I'll say add. As and when I add, do you see there are two things that are getting deployed? What is that? Link 1 and what? Link 2. You know what is happening right now? If I just refresh, in virtual network called ECS2, I have what? Link 1. I'll just refresh this out. And here it is saying peering status is getting updating out here. Let's go to the North Europe network. And here also there is something called peerings. Link 2. I did not do anything here. Microsoft itself created a link 2 out here for virtual network 2. If I come back here and say peerings, let's wait for some time. Status is what? Connected, which means peering is established in place. Let's say VNet peering in Azure. This is what it's telling you. Virtual network peering enables you to seamlessly connect two or more virtual networks in Azure. The virtual network peering appears to be acting as one for connectivity purposes, which means both the networks are not now different. They are just the same. Now my question back again. I am already on this particular machine. Can I do an RDP from this machine to this machine over a private IP? Should I be able to do it?
No one-way communication established
Yes, only communication established between what?
from 192 to 10.0.
Yes, and that is established. Communication is already established. So what's the issue?
We have to
Yes.
configure on second
Hmm?
mission also.
No, I have already configured the second network. The link is already established between the first network and the second network. It's not the machine that I'm looking at. It's the network that I'm looking at.
Right.
It's already there. Link 1 and link 2 are already there. Let's see. Let's go into this particular VM. It is giving me this particular error was there already. I'll say okay. I'll again try to hit the connect. What is happening now? Asking me for the credentials. I'll give a credential here. It's telling what? VM North Europe. I'll say oh yes. I said when I do this, what is happening do you think? I am in a connection with what? With which machine am I connection with right now? Second VM,
Connected.
North Europe.
Yes,
Over what?
over
A private IP.
private address.
I did not even use a public IP out here. So if I just minimize this, this is now an RDP connection inside an RDP connection. It's an RDP inside an RDP. If I open this out, this is 192.168.0. Just here 4 out here. It's booting up. It'll take some time to boot up. And once it's booted up, you'll be able to see that machine also as such out there. This is now the second machine. This is your first machine out here. Again, if you want to, let's say, differentiate, let's put a notepad. I'll say this is VM1 or something like that. This is VM1. This is VM2 acting as an RDP session inside the VM1 out here as such. And how is it possible? The reason being, we established something called as what? A virtual network peering link. So virtual network peering is used in place or it's put in place so that so that two different networks can communicate with each other over private IP address spaces out here as such. Apart from this, you don't have to do any other configuration out here for the machines to talk to each other as such out there. Yes, any questions earlier? Anyone? Any questions earlier that I can take? Yes. Uh, there is no IP address for what? For VM1 or VM2? The IP address. But for You don't have to log into RDP. Did I log into RDP to connect? No. I am not connecting machines here. I'm connecting networks here. How can I connect the networks? Just go into the portal, establish the peering. Hmm. Sorry. Yes. 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 When you say parallelize it, what do you mean by that? Very firstly, you cannot connect to VM2 using your machine. Using your machine, unless you have something called as a VPN established. Unless you have something known as a VPN established on your machine out there as such. Yes. Any more questions here, guys?
Suresh Teja here.
Good, please.
I have a question. I have a team of 10 people. I mean, it's 10 to 15 people. I want to give them a remote desktop. Okay.
Okay.
But I will only create one virtual mission.
Okay.
So can I do that? I mean, to say I'll create one virtual mission on that,
Mm-hmm.
creating 10 to 15 RDPs. So
Mm-hmm.
every user will have to get the different login ID or a different IP. So how
Uh,
it will proceed?
Very firstly, is your machine domain joined? When you work in a company,
Sorry,
there is something called domain joined machines. Did you connect your machine to a domain?
that I am not aware.
Yeah. So
So
firstly, very importantly, if you want each and everyone to have their own logins, you
uh
can integrate virtual machines with Azure Active Directory.
is it AVD we're talking about?
Sorry.
AVD, Azure Virtual Machine, Azure Virtual Desktop.
No, not that one. It's not that one. I'm telling that your machine has to be a part of your domain, and after
Okay.
that you can, let's say, go ahead and connect, let's say, or you can go ahead, let's say, ask your users to go ahead use their individual logins and sign into the machines out there as such. So I've given you the article out here on how do you domain join a machine and how do you make sure that, let's say, 10 users using their own logins can, let's say, log into this machine out here as such. So you can go
In
through it
one
and
in one
in
in
one.
one virtual mission, we can have multiple RDP can log in, right?
Yes, in one virtual machine you can have multiple RDPs logging in as such out there.
Okay. And did you had a chance to revert to my email? Just checking, you might receive my email, right?
I already did revert it in the morning. You asked for the image process, so I went ahead and sent you the process to go ahead and create an image for the machine out there as such. So that will help you create the image and redeploy the same image across, let's say, or no, replicate the same image out here so that you have your bookmarks and all in each and every browser as such.
Okay.
Yes. Anyone? Any more questions, guys? Anyone? Any more questions here? Okay, so that's it from mine today then. Please go through the concept of what is a virtual network peering. That's the main focus that I want you to do on what do you mean by virtual network peering in Azure. Just go through the documentation and practice the demo that we have today out here. Okay. Thank you and have a good day ahead. Thanks, guys.